I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney, and Prime Minister Starmer, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers, and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice. You're on the wrong side of humanity. And you're on the wrong side of history.
Breaking. The announcement hit London like a diplomatic explosion. Israel has officially frozen Britain out of every shared intelligence and defense partnership. No exemptions, no quiet back channels. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's statement was short, deliberate, and devastating. A nation that abandons its allies should not expect friendship in return. Within minutes, it dominated every screen in Westminster. The trigger was clear and fast. Keir Starmer had done what no British leader before him dared. He backed the International Criminal Court's arrest warrants against senior Israeli officials and followed it by announcing a full arms embargo on Israel, covering both offensive and defensive systems. The decisions came just 4 days apart. The response came in less than one. What began as a diplomatic disagreement escalated into a full rupture between two countries bound by decades of intelligence and military cooperation. Now the world is watching the fallout spread across capitals and markets. Inside Britain, the message is unmistakable. The government's credibility is collapsing faster than it can explain itself. It started quietly, with a short press release from the Prime Minister's office. The United Kingdom reaffirms its support for international law and the independence of the International Criminal Court. Hours later, Starmer doubled down in Parliament, defending the ICC's move to pursue warrants against Israeli officials for alleged war crimes. He framed it as moral clarity. No nation, no matter its history or its friendships, stands above the law, he said, voice steady, expression controlled. The reaction was immediate. In Jerusalem, officials called the move a betrayal in plain sight. Israeli media described it as a knife from an ally's hand. Then, before the dust could settle, Starmer's second decision landed like a hammer. A total arms embargo on Israel. Not just offensive weapons, but defensive systems as well. That meant Iron Dome interceptors, radar software, and joint defense technology. To Israeli defense officials, it wasn't policy. It was abandonment. Inside Whitehall, confusion turned to alarm. Senior Foreign Office staff learned of the embargo, not from Downing Street, but from Israeli diplomatic protests lodged within the hour. Even the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, was reportedly blindsided. One official described the atmosphere as stunned disbelief. Another called it an ambush of our own allies. Then came the first visible fracture. Dame Barbara Woodward, Britain's ambassador to the United Nations, tendered her resignation overnight. Her letter, leaked to The Times, cited a breakdown in communication and trust between the Foreign Office and its diplomatic corps. She had found out about the policy from an Israeli counterpart before hearing a single word from London. By morning, the Foreign Office was in crisis mode. MI6 analysts flagged high risk of strategic fallout. The Defense Ministry warned that Israel was not a partner easily replaced. Inside Number 10, aides tried to frame it as principle over politics, Britain standing firm on international law. But what they called principle, Israel called betrayal. The two decisions had collided into one of the most severe diplomatic ruptures in modern British history. The match had been struck. The fuse was already burning. Israel didn't wait. That night, Netanyahu appeared before cameras at 9 p.m. Jerusalem time, flanked by his security cabinet and senior defense chiefs. His words were precise, surgical. A nation that abandons its allies in their hour of need should not expect friendship in return. He announced a complete suspension of intelligence sharing with the United Kingdom, an immediate halt to all joint defense and cyber projects, and a full review of every bilateral agreement between the two nations. Within hours, the effects began to ripple. British officials bound for Israel were denied landing clearance. David Lammy, en route to Tel Aviv for crisis talks, was forced to turn his government jet around mid-air over the Mediterranean. Flight trackers lit up online, showing a G7 foreign secretary diverted in real time. The humiliation was public and deliberate. Then came the sanctions that London didn't see coming. Mossad reclassified British officials as security risks, effectively freezing decades of intelligence coordination. Cyber cooperation, once central to protecting British infrastructure, was suspended. Israeli firms that manage parts of the UK's energy grid and financial systems began quietly pulling their teams. What had once been an invisible safety net vanished overnight. For Britain's intelligence agencies, the consequences were immediate. In the last 5 years, Israeli data had helped stop 17 planned terror attacks on British soil. That pipeline just went dark. Every counter-terror algorithm, every live feed from Middle Eastern networks, every encrypted channel that once fed into MI5's databases went silent. One intelligence officer told Sky, "It's like losing radar in a storm." Israel's defense industry followed suit. Joint ventures with British defense contractors were suspended, including cybersecurity collaborations and technology exchanges worth billions. Rafael Advanced Defense Systems withdrew its team from a London project within 24 hours. Elbit Systems issued a terse statement. All operations with UK government agencies are paused pending review. The move wasn't just retaliation, it was demonstration. Netanyahu was sending a message to every capital watching. Loyalty has consequences. By morning, analysts were already calling it the worst rupture between the two countries since the Suez Crisis. Former MI6 chief Sir Alex Younger called the decision strategically suicidal. Lord Robertson warned that Britain has lost its most valuable intelligence partner in the region. And as headlines rolled in, Israel cuts Britain off, intelligence freeze begins, Whitehall in panic, one question echoed across London. Did Starmer realise what he had triggered, or had he underestimated the cost of moral clarity? Because this wasn't a temporary chill. This was a freeze, one that left Britain isolated, vulnerable, and staring at a security gap it might never be able to fill. By dawn, Britain's diplomatic fallout had become a regional crisis. Across the Middle East, former partners quietly chose a side, and it wasn't London's. Within hours of Netanyahu's announcement, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain released nearly identical statements calling for unity among allies who face common threats. It was subtle but unmistakable. None of them defended Britain's stance. Behind closed doors, the Gulf Cooperation Council convened an emergency session in Riyadh. Leaks from that meeting were damning. Ministers reportedly questioned whether Britain could still be trusted to uphold defence guarantees signed under previous administrations. One delegate from Kuwait summarised it bluntly. London's word used to mean something. Now it means hesitation. The ripple spread beyond the region. In Europe, France and Poland, two of Britain's closest defence partners, began reassessing joint training schedules. A senior French diplomat told Le Monde, "Britain's credibility as a security partner has been shaken." Polish defence officials privately questioned whether London would abandon allies under pressure. What started as an argument between two nations was now an alliance-wide crisis of confidence. Then came the markets. Within 24 hours of Israel's suspension, nearly $30 billion in bilateral trade was under review. Defense contracts worth $12 billion were paused or cancelled outright as Israeli firms pulled out of British projects. Israeli venture capital funds, previously investing heavily in London's tech scene, began redirecting roughly $4 billion in funding to US-based startups. Bloomberg described the moment as a confidence collapse at the heart of government. The pound fell against the dollar, bond yields jumped, and London's financial sector braced for uncertainty. The economic damage was matched only by the political panic inside Downing Street. Cabinet leaks painted a picture of paralysis. One minister reportedly warned, "We've made Britain a target without protection." Another message, circulating through encrypted channels, read, "We are isolated, strategically and morally." By Friday evening, senior aides admitted the government was no longer managing policy, but managing fallout. What had begun as a moral gesture had mutated into both economic and security isolation. Britain had not just lost an ally, it had lost the network that shielded it from global risk. The deeper cost wasn't visible in headlines. It was hidden in the silence of servers and the blank spaces on intelligence dashboards. For decades, Israeli intelligence had been one of Britain's most reliable sources of early warnings, tracking terror cells, weapons shipments, and regional cyber threats. That pipeline was now gone. MI5 analysts confirmed the extent of the blackout. Daily intelligence feeds from Tel Aviv stopped arriving. Access to shared databases monitoring Iranian nuclear development was revoked. Updates on Hezbollah's movements in Syria vanished from secure networks. Even cyber defense alerts, critical for Britain's financial systems and energy grids, went silent. A classified report summarized the risk in one phrase: operational blindness. Defense insiders said the gap could take years to fill, if it could be filled at all. Former intelligence officials warned that without Israeli data, Britain's ability to track extremist networks in Europe would collapse. "We've gone from seeing the horizon to flying blind," one MI6 source told The Telegraph. But the political damage was matched by emotional fallout at home. Across Britain's Jewish communities, fear spread quickly. Synagogues that had relied on Israeli security consultants suspended programs. Schools cancelled public events. Community leaders described an atmosphere of anxiety not felt since the early 2000s. One rabbi in London put it simply: "We've been left exposed." Jewish advocacy groups demanded an urgent review of security protocols, while community boards warned of rising online threats. The Home Office tried to reassure the public, but insiders admitted the loss of Israeli data meant protective coverage has degraded. Inside Labour, fractures widened. Leaked WhatsApp exchanges from senior advisors revealed deep divisions. Some ministers argued for an immediate reset with Israel. Others warned that apologizing now would look like weakness. "We've chosen principle over prudence," one aide wrote, "and now the principle is costing lives." It was no longer a debate about diplomacy. It was a national security self-sabotage. Britain hadn't been attacked, but it had disarmed itself in plain sight. Now the question hanging over Britain is simple and brutal. Can Starmer repair the damage, or has the UK already crossed the point of no return? Washington is watching, Brussels is waiting. And inside Downing Street, every phone call from an ally begins with the same unspoken question: is Britain still a partner, or just a cautionary tale?